This is U.S. Immigration Attorney Sharifa Tharpe. I'm here live to take your U.S. immigration related questions. Go ahead and put your questions in the comments now so that I can answer your questions. Today, I have a really insightful topic for you. So, I know there are people out there right now who you're currently married to a U.S. citizen or even a permanent resident, and you're being at the same time you're being mistreated by this individual. You are in a situation where you would like your immigration status, but maybe your spouse is playing games with filing for you, they're procrastinating, or you plain don't trust them at this point, or there are just some red flags that you're seeing that is making you hesitate to go through the marriage-based process. This is where I am going to help you to look at the pros and cons of the VAWA process. That's basically applying without your spouse, or the marriage-based process, whether you should move forward with a marriage-based process. Now, with the VAWA process, what I would say is whenever my clients retain me, I have never heard my client regret applying for VAWA in VAWA as it relates to their other choice, where they have to either finish out the process with their spouse or finish out the process with their spouse. So, given the choice between marriage-based process or VAWA, I know my clients have never expressed any regret about pursuing VAWA. And the reason being is VAWA enables my clients to be able to move forward in a confidential, safe process. They are the ones that have control over their process, not the spouse. And the spouse will not know about the process because immigration services has a confidentiality rule, and they make sure that they're sending the mail about your case to an address, a safe address, which is usually my address as the attorney. So, they are able to go through whether this spouse decides they want to support, they want to start treating them right or change at some point. The VAWA process will continue regardless, or whether, at one point, if they decide that they don't want to be married with you, or you have to leave because you're being mistreated or you're being severely abused and you have to leave the situation, your VAWA process moves forward regardless of what happens in your marriage situation. So, if you're given the choice between VAWA and the marriage-based green card process, the first thing I would say is the fact that you're even thinking about this means that you are in trouble here. If you are thinking, should I go with VAWA or go with the marriage-based process, it means you're in trouble. I would say this: if you're thinking about VAWA, do it. Go for it, because it means that you don't have your spouse has violated your trust. They have violated you in some way. You don't think that they will move forward with the process. So if you're considering the two, don't chance it. Make sure that you seek a safe, confidential process through VAWA. Now, I know, of course, at the same time, you're thinking, what are the cons though? What are the disadvantages of VAWA? Now, just before COVID, the processing times for VAWA was like around 6 months. At least, within 6 months, you could at least get your work permit. Work permit, social security number to give you some stability. And then maybe another year, you would have your VAWA approval and be on the way to the green card. There is a backlog right now with VAWA petitions. And because of that, it means that if you apply for VAWA, you're going to have to go through that backlog. But what I would say here is I would still go with VAWA if I were faced between trusting someone who is just not trustworthy, or pursuing your own process, I would choose VAWA here still. Because what happens with VAWA is that within 8 months to 12 months of applying, you still get your work permit and your social security number. Now, the work permits right now are 5 years. That can always be subject to change. This is why it's so important to make sure you apply, get on it now, because it is a 5 year work permit that helps you to stay stable and stay settled in until you can finish out the VAWA process and the green card process. So even though it does take a longer time, right now we're seeing 2.5 years to 3 years from filing to green card. Um, you still have the ability to get your work permit, get your travel document, means you don't have to be stuck here in the US, and to get your social security number. Social security number is that number that everyone gets in the US if you're going to work here, if you're living here. If you have official legal immigration status, you get the social security number, and that's very important to get jobs and certain types of benefits, like, or even opening a bank account in some cases. So, um, you know, there are right now, I would say that the disadvantage is the processing time is long for you to see the green card, but along the way, you still get your work permit and all the benefits that help to stabilize you while you're here. So it's still balances out there, in that you don't have to wait the full 2.5 years to at least get some stability before moving on. Also, within 3 months to 6 months after filing, we get what's called a prima facie determination letter. And that letter is sort of like a pre-approval for a mortgage. Um, it's like that, right? Where you get a pre-approved letter to go shopping, to give your offers. But then when you have your, give your offer and it's accepted, then when, as the underwriter is making a final decision on your loan application for the mortgage, they they go ahead and make a final decision on it later. So even though you got the pre-approval letter, they had to make a final determination before you can get that final mortgage, right? Before you can buy the home you want and do the closing on the house. This is the same thing with the VAWA. They issue this sort of a letter that I would say is similar to a pre-approval letter. In some states, it allows you to get your driver's license and to get certain benefits that can help you, especially if you're maybe pushed out of the home already. Then the prima facie determination letter can help you to get food assistance, to even get housing, to get shelter, temporary shelter until you can um, get back on your feet. So that's because the immigration service does a preliminary review, sees that you have met the basic requirements, and so they issue this until they can do a detailed review of your application and make a final determination, and then give you a final approval for the VAWA. Once you're approved for the VAWA, you move on to the green card. So I would say here, my input here would be, if you're thinking about it right now. Now, somebody asked here, what's VAWA? So if you're just following me, I'm going to explain what VAWA is so that you understand the full context of the conversation here. And then I'm going to jump into questions. So the VAWA is for any individual. I'm talking about it in the spouse situation, where if you are an immigrant and you're being mistreated by your US citizen or legal permanent resident spouse, then VAWA is there to be a safe, confidential process for you to apply without involving that spouse. So they will have no knowledge of it. And I always say, keep it confidential. Don't go flaunting to that spouse that you're applying for your green card without them. Of course, you don't want to do that, but I know sometimes in a in the heat of moments, maybe these things might be said, but under no circumstance should you be saying this to the spouse, because it's confidential, and it's confidential to protect you. And so you get to go through this process safely, and without any interference. And what I often say too is you have the benefit of being protected too, because when you are going through the process, the immigration service has to be very careful about the kind of information they even take from the spouse who's mistreating you. So, say for example, say you are going through the marriage-based process already with your spouse, and then your spouse starts to sabotage the process. Maybe they decide that they're not going to show up to the interview, or they start to threaten. One thing I've seen is they start to threaten and say, oh, if you don't do this or do that, I'm going to call immigration and I'm going to tell them to get you deported because you married me for papers, and I'm going to tell them that. In a case like that, immigration, once you've switched, because you can do that. So say you hear this and you're like, okay, I need to protect myself. You and you need to make immigration aware of this. You file for VAWA. The minute you file for VAWA, your application is now protected. They cannot just take notes from the spouse and then use it against you in the application process. They cannot take any information that cannot be corroborated from that spouse who's mistreating you to then use it against you and issue a denial in your application. They must only use the information that's before them. So that means that you do end up having some protections in the process. Your interests are protected, and the officer looks at the evidence that you present to make sure it's credible before making a final decision. Now, just to close out what I have to say and then jump into your questions. So please go ahead, put your questions in the comments so I can start answering those questions. I wanted to talk about those two scenarios where VAWA is a very important benefit to apply for. So one is, if you're already going through the marriage-based process, it's not too late to switch to VAWA. As a matter of fact, I would say this: your future in the US may very well depend on you making that switch, and making that switch in time. Because what I have observed happening, and what sometimes clients end up retaining me when complications are already happening in the process, and it's stressful, it's more complicated, it's more expensive for the client. But if you see red flags, they're threatening not to show up to the interview with you. They're using the immigration process against you. They're threatening to give false information to immigration. They're threatening to write immigration and tell them that they're going to cancel the petition. I've seen that, by the way, where the spouse secretly canceled the petition on the spouse. If that's happening, start thinking about protecting yourself and evaluate whether VAWA is going to be good for you. And why I say this, why I say it's very important to make that decision earlier than later, is because they could deny. So if it comes down to the wire and you get called in for an interview with your spouse, and your spouse decides they're not showing up to the interview, or they show up to the interview and they start to intentionally sabotage that interview, you know what happens? That officer is not going to turn to you and ask you if you're being mistreated. They're not going to try to side with you in any way. They're going to issue a big fat denial. And that means that your work permit, if you already have an existing work permit, your travel document will then be terminated upon that denial. And you have no green card, and now you're denied, and now you're here without status. And now you're stuck with a spouse who's mistreating you. They feel like they have something over you, control over you, because they've gotten you denied, and they've sabotaged your process. So guess what? Now it's on the record that immigration doesn't believe your marriage is bona fide because of how the spouse handled it. So now they have even a potential suspicion of marriage fraud, because sometimes when they don't believe the marriage is bona fide, the next thing that they start looking at is a potential marriage fraud. So make sure you make that decision early on, than sooner than later, to avoid these kind of complications. Now, what if you're not currently going through the marriage-based process, you're married, but you notice that they're doing the same thing. Say you're trying to work on the paperwork. They're not working with you. They're not cooperating. Any little argument comes up, they start to bring up your immigration status, or they start to get mad at you when you try to bring up how to move forward with your immigration process. Along with these red flags, of course, they're mistreating you. So when I talk about mistreatment, doesn't have to be hitting, doesn't have to be physical violence. Verbal, emotional, financial, all count as forms of mistreatment. And even where they use your immigration status, that is a form of emotional abuse, by the way, and manipulation, where they use your immigration status against you. But if they start to hold it over your head, they'll get you the green card, they won't get you the green card, they'll get you the green card, and they're just going back and forth like that, just depending on their mood for the day. That's emotional abuse. It is a part of the policies that this is considered a form of extreme cruelty, because it's not just abuse, but they do define those who qualify for VAWA as abuse: verbal, mental, emotional, physical, but physical isn't required, and also extreme cruelty. So have they done something that's intentionally cruel, or have they done anything intentionally sabotage your process or to maintain control over you, right? And that type of coercion. If they know that as long as they have this immigration process hanging over your head, you're going to comply with their demand for control. So if you're in that situation, start talking to me. A consultation is completely confidential, and it is meant for us to determine what the best move would be for you going forward in your process to help you to become successful. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and just go through some questions. So please hang tight as I go through. I'm on Instagram, I'm on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and I'm on TikTok. So I usually go through the questions here to answer as many as I can get to. So let's get started. How long does adjustment of status with 245I take? So the process right now for adjustment of status is taking 1 year to a year and a half, which includes the 245I. How long after your I-130 is approved is your green card approved? So if you're here in the US and your I-130 is approved, that's a good sign, because it means that usually the interview, if this is a marriage-based process, by the way, this is marriage-based process. If they just went ahead and approved your I-130, it means that in short order, they are going to approve the green card. However, they may want additional items from you before they approve the adjustment of status application, if you're going through adjustment of status. And that usually involves the medical. They may need the medical, or they may need additional documents from you before they approve the adjustment of status. So I have seen after the I-130 is approved, after about a month, we got the request for evidence. We sent in the medical, and then after another month, we got the approval. So while every case is different, that was based on my experience, that's usually the timeline. I-485 approval came today. Congrats. Can I work until the physical card arrives? I didn't get a EAD. So you're not officially a green card holder until you get the green card. So make sure that you follow up there. Um, the getting an approval notice alone is not the immigration benefit in itself. So check where your card is. Okay, can I send the video of abusing when filed for VAWA? This is a really good question. No, they don't accept videos. However, what you should be doing is take screenshots of the video, important part of the video as photos, and then you can include those as photographic evidence of abuse. Um, do you interview with VAWA? So they interview for the VAWA green card. At the stage you're being applying for VAWA, no. But then after you're approved for the VAWA, you have to move on to the green card process. What they do though is they may schedule an interview. They may waive it, but they may schedule an interview if they have additional questions, not about the abuse, because they've already made a decision about that part, but what they may want to know is maybe things related to your admissibility, maybe past record. They want to make sure that you qualify for the green card in other respects. How does the self-petition go? So I described that in the early part of the live. Can I use my advanced parole while my VAWA is pending? Clean records. I'm gonna come back safely. So I can't give you specific advice about whether you should use your advanced parole. Make sure you consult with your existing attorney. Make sure you get legal advice. But that's what the advanced parole is there for, generally speaking. It is there to make sure that you can travel back into the country if you leave the country. So whether it's safe for you, though, is going to depend on your circumstances. Can someone get deported being a green card holder and having a deportation order since 2002 and didn't know? So this is very complicated. Make sure you talk to an attorney. This is complex. They were not supposed to issue a green card if you had a deportation order. However, there may be some legal analysis that was done to determine you're no longer inadmissible, and this is why you still got the green card. If you're having any doubts, though, this is where it's very important to talk to an attorney, because at the point that you're applying for citizenship, instead of getting citizenship, you could be then your green card could be revoked, and then they could try to reinstate that deportation order again or send you another notice to appear. So very important that you do a full investigation into this to determine what occurred. Was your green card issued by mistake? Is it possible to file an EAD after receiving two? Yes. Now, keep in mind though that the, the the EAD is the employment authorization card, the work permit. If you are the spouse of a citizen, then you should be submitting that EAD with everything else. So this is where it's important to get legal representation. However, if you have to wait for your priority number to become current or your priority date to become current, this is where filing of the EAD, you have to wait. You may have to wait, but I need to understand where you are, what your category is to determine whether you need to wait before you file the EAD and what's the projected date to apply for your work permit. Are you in New York? We're located based in Florida. However, as an immigration attorney, it is federal law, which means we can represent clients all over the country and the globe. So no matter where you are, I can help you. What's next after biometrics? Biometrics in what case? Um, I-765 C8 initial application processing time took over 30 days. So so I don't know if that's a comment or a question. Is it a bona fide of marriage easier to prove when you have a child together? Naturally, that's good evidence. Of course, if you have a child together, but don't take that for granted because you have people doing all sorts of crazy things to prove bona fides. And then sometimes you have relationships that are no longer real relation. Maybe they have a child in the past and then now they're helping each other out. They're not in a real relationship. And maybe on public record that comes out. So you have to don't take the fact that you have a child together to don't take that for granted to say you don't have to show any other evidence because they could still look for other evidence of a bona fide marriage, like to fact proof that you're living together along with having a child, proof that you have financial responsibilities together along with having a child. So having a child alone is good evidence, but it doesn't mean you'll get approved. It just means it's stronger evidence, but still work on that other evidence. I've already divorced. Is there an app for me? So VAWA, you can apply up to 2 years after your divorce is finalized. Can I use my advanced parole? Let's see. I lost that one. Okay, I went for my citizenship 2 times and I failed. Please for advice, no education. So, if you are having a problem with the reading and writing test, one, you have two options here. One is that you can go ahead and take some courses. They have, nonprofits that offer courses to help you get up to speed with reading and writing that can assist you with your English reading and writing test. If you don't have confidence in your ability to learn and study for the test, then you need to show through the diagnosis of a doctor or a therapist that you have a disability that's stopping you from performing these kinds of tests, from doing these tests. And you have to have the physician or the therapist complete those extra forms in order to submit with your application so they can waive that requirement. It's going to depend, though, here on your specific facts. Can someone with a charge get VAWA approved? Absolutely. Yes. There are ways to, if needed, there are ways to ask for forgiveness. And in addition to that, if the charge is related to the mistreatment, they could not even require you to submit a waiver for forgiveness. How to know if we have deportation order? So there's FOIA, basically asking for your records. And then there is the site, so the EOIR site, where if you know your A number, you can search using your A number to see if there have been a past deportation order. Can someone with a charge get VAWA approved? I answered that. All right, so let me go on to these questions here. How long does it take to I-485 interview after my VAWA is approved? So I would say about another 6 months to a year. Please, how many months are going to be before someone gets working authorization after filing for VAWA? I've seen 8 to 12 months. How important is the police certification for a T visa or to any humanitarian visa in general? So Now, what's the most important thing here when it comes to the T is the report, not necessarily the certification, which is not required, but the report is very important. When it comes to U visa, the certification is going to be essential. So reporting to police is going to be important. And keep in mind that police is not the only agency to report to. There are other types of agencies that are not necessarily the police, but it could be a civil organization as well, like the Department of Labor, that also can respond to any request for U and T certifications. Can you expedite my EAD through VAWA? So I only expedite for my request expedite for my clients. I don't take on cases where someone wants their already filed case expedited. All right. I-131 travel document. How can I apply emergency? My I-485 is pending. So there is a way to apply for your emergency travel document. Go to the website, the uscis.gov, and go to tools, and you'll see some options there. Can you use an I-130 approval, bona fide marriage evidence for VAWA? That is one of the pieces of evidence that can be used to show the bona fide of a marriage. Please, what are the things that you will get first to know that your VAWA is going to be approved? So you're going to get a receipt notice. All right, so I have 2 minutes. I'm going to quickly go through and answer some quick questions, and then I have to go. But I'm working on being back tomorrow. We're around lunchtime where we can I can address your question. So if I didn't get to your question, please save your question, come on and ask tomorrow. Can I ask about T visas? Absolutely, I'm here for it. Is VAWA considered asylum? It is a separate yes, it's completely different from asylum. What advice can you give someone who has been married but the spouse have no intention to put your documents, and when you ask for a divorce they also don't want to do that either? Give me a call. Let's talk about VAWA. No, I can't give you specific advice to say you qualify for VAWA until I talk to you in a consultation. But this is usually a red flag for me if someone is not looking out for your best interest. A spouse, so supposed to be your partner in life, is not looking out for your best interest, and they are holding you hostage by refusing to allow you to leave. It means there's something going on there. So give me a call. Let's talk. When you apply for VAWA, how long is the process to get the work permit? 8 to 12 months. I got an interview coming up next month, but I'm not fully sure if my wife's going to show up. What should I do? Let's talk about VAWA here. If you should be sure that your spouse is going to be going to your interview. That's what your spouse is supposed to be, the person that you depend on the most, more than anybody else. Your spouse is your partner in life. If you cannot depend on your spouse, then that means that is a serious red flag that something is going wrong here. And you need to get legal advice about how to move forward, because I've seen where the spouse doesn't show up, or they show up and they give a really good performance, but not a good performance for you. They do it for the officers, make the officers feel like this is not a real marriage, and then you get into trouble. So make sure you understand the consequences and how to get out of it. All right, I am so sorry I can't get any more questions today. I have to head out, but I will be back tomorrow. Please go ahead. These are all good questions and I want to get to them. So let's continue this conversation tomorrow, and you can ask your questions tomorrow. Just be sure to put your questions in as soon as as soon as I come on. I try to be here around lunchtime, but keep in mind that I say this: follow, subscribe, because you will then get notification when I'm live, and then you can join me then, just in case I have to join late. All right. Have a good one. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.